and welcome along. There'll be others that join as the next few minutes unfold. But today is open to everyone to join. These are webinars that we do every week. There's a different purpose to each one, but this one is more sort of an open training about ID. Last week and what we'll do next week, for example, is what we call our ID masterclass, and that's for people who want to take a more deeper dive into some of the nuances of their ID. You'll find, if that interests you, you'll find those classes really valuable as well. And then typically once a month, we weren't able to do it last month, but we do what we call a game changer meeting once a month, which is someone who's got a story that's, typically of some sort of game changing form, having used ID, to share that story. And I interview that person, then we have a Q&A with the group, and they're a lot of fun as well. So they're sort of different each week to keep it a little, spiced up. And we're actually just working with our marketing people yesterday on how we might adjust some things yet again to keep it, always fresh as this year continues to unfold. So stay close to our communications, and you'll see some of those new things coming up. I think you'll notice them from May onwards. So anyway, all very exciting. We always start with talking about people's peak performance indicator. We call that, it's a mechanism or a tool that we have that's all about people being in stride. So at the end of the day, living your best life is about being true to yourself. And many people before me spoke about know thyself, to thine own self be true, living in stride, living in flow. Many people have written about the merits of living life that way. What's been missing is, how do you do that? What does in stride look like for you? What does the best version of you look like for you? And the ID basically gives you the code that says, this is you. This is the way you were born, the way you're wired, the way you'll always be. It's the innate, natural part of you. And whenever you're true to that, that's when you're best. And it's not just best in terms of how you perform and, your productivity. It's also best in terms of how you come across to other people. So when some people will say things like, I don't even like myself lately. This isn't me. I'm more moody. I'm more angry. Things irritate me that don't normally. I'm edgy. All of those things occur when you're out of stride. And so one of the things we do when we start these meetings is just stop and reflect on, where are you today? Like, with the way the week's going so far, are you coming from a place of being in stride, where you're being true to yourself, whatever that is for you, given your ID? Or are you being pulled out of stride? And a simple way we ask that, and you listen to this voice inside you, is to say, on a scale of 0 to 10, if 10 was you being in stride, flying, or as the athletes would say, in the zone, and a 1 out of 10 is you're so flat, so demotivated, you just don't even want to contemplate the day, what's the number that comes up for you? And there will be a number. Now, some people say, I don't really relate to numbers. I'd say, well, I'm more at the top of that chart or I'm at the bottom. Doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just a case of, where are you? Are you in stride or out of stride? And how might you reflect that? And some of you might want to just put your number or your response in the chat over on the right there. You can see we've got Jose, who's an 8, Ellen 9, Judy a 10 yet again. Good on you, Judy. Leonie's an 8. Just what would you put down? And you can just see, this is a great way to pulse not only yourself, but if you're working in a team, this particular exercise becomes what they call a common language. And even in a family, you could have this. If this is something you did with your partner or kids, they're old enough, you can just say, if someone's looking a bit off or something, you say, hey, what's your number? And they might say, oh, what's going on that makes it a 6, Or if they're a 9 or a 10, wow, what's going on that makes it that? And it's the story that comes after the number that really is where the value is. The sharing of why, what are you doing to get to a 10 or stay there? What's happened that pulls you to a 6 or a 4, and then what can you do to get back in stride and get to a much higher number? So in the sharing of these stories is where it can not only be cathartic for you to share, but you can be making a hell of a difference for somebody else to share what's going on for you. And there's many people on these calls so this is week 52. So we've actually been going for longer than a year because we had a break over Christmas, but this is week 52. So happy anniversary to all of you people that have been on here for a long time. Most of you have, or quite a number of you have. But when, you've heard, like I have, so many people have said, wow, listening to someone else's story just either reassured me that I'm not the only screwed up person here, or there's ideas for how you can be more in stride yourselves. So let's just give a few minutes for anyone who might want to share their number, and more importantly, what's behind your number. Who'd like to kick off? Jose, you were first up with your response, so why don't we let you go first? You dressed up for the occasion today, so might as well let you.
No, it's cold. It's just cold.
All right.
So, first of all, happy Bengali New Year's for the 14th, everyone. It's 1428 now. And okay. The reason I was reflecting on the fact that it's an 8, like, why am I not giving myself a 9? And I think it's because, again, it's that combination of numbers that I've got. And it's like, there's still so much I don't know and don't understand that is not yet under my control. And so there's excitement here of learning more and getting more information and more in tune and more things, but there's also still more to do. So that there's a level of lack of satisfaction. There's more for me to do, so I've got to get that done yet. And so that's why I'm not scoring the 10 yet. That's for me anyway, and that's how I interpret it.
It's a great response, and thank you for sharing it, Jose. I would coach you to do something a little different, which is separate the two. Separate the goodness that you feel from the growth still to occur, because you actually come across really well. Like people who are an 8, 9, or a 10 start to cast a really good shadow, like a shadow that becomes magnetic and appealing and attractive to others. When you're a 7 and a 6, you might be surviving, living, doing, performing, getting by, but it doesn't cast the shadow that really entices others to want to be around you. And when you are at a lower level, like say you were a 2 or a 3 or even a 4, there can be, depending on how you deal with it, there can be a negative energy around you that makes other people want to stay away from you because you're sort of bitchy or snipey or just seeing the negative side of things. So you're just flat yourself, So I want you to know, Jose, you first of all, you come across like with a lot of smiling, good, positive energy, confidence to share straight up, all of that. So there's goodness already in what you're doing. But when you're a verifier, and especially your whole combination of your numbers, you're not someone that wants to big note yourself. So you typically are a hard marker and you tend to underplay, but the underplaying and they're going, well, I'm not a 10 because I've still got all these other things to do. But it's almost like you are a 10, but then there's some things that you still want to do. So that subtracts off the score, you know what I mean? And by separating them, you can still be a 10 and it's not a but it's an and I'm excited about the new things that I also want to learn. Because the reason I say that to you is anyone who's an avoid improviser like you and many other people on the call, when you feel stressed or suppressed or constrained or not at your best, what actually starts to evaporate is your personality. You get more serious, you get more task oriented. And when you let your own light shine, in terms of saying, no, you know what, I'm having an awesome day and I am a 10 or I'm a 9 or whatever the score is, and you just bake in that, there's something about what comes across in terms of your energy to other people. And it's just really cool because you are a substance person, when you sort of let yourself loose and just go, you know what, damn it, I'm having a hell of a day. Yep, like everyone else has got heaps more to learn, but it's just really awesome. The whole of your persona shows up. And it's very cool when someone who's got substance shows up like that. It's more meaningful than someone who's just normally flighty anyway. All right. Thanks, Jose. Anyone else who would like to just share? Dilip, welcome back.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I'm at a 9, and last week when you asked the same question, I was at a 7, and nothing materially changed from last week to this week, but my number went up. Yeah, so there's a little bit of backstory to that, right? So last week was one of my lower scores, the 7, because something that I was expecting didn't happen quite the way I wanted it to. I got something else instead. And I was kind of downbeat, right, about that. And that is why I put myself at a 7. Then like a few days went by, and I somehow came to realize that, okay, this other thing that I got instead was actually probably the better outcome, right? Even though I was not expecting it. So so I'm kind of back at a 9. So my point of this is, even though my situation hasn't changed in the last week, nothing really materially outside of my world happened differently, but my number went up because I kind of accepted and let things happen the way they were happening to me, as opposed to being too controlling of the outcome, right? So
perfect.
that was, I thought, very fascinating, because so that way, like, I could control how I feel as opposed to letting the situation completely take control of me.
Perfect. Perfect. That's a great example where it's not anything changing around you, it's how you deal with it that changes. And the same thing could be true in reverse. Something could have gone negatively, but because you don't, because of how you relate to it, you could actually still navigate that journey from a really good place, you know? So you're speaking a very important point here, which is it's not what happens to us in life, it's how we choose to deal with it. And in your case, when you are an avoid verify, like that first number on your score, the 4 in verify is the avoid verify drive. That's, 4 in verify. And that's the drive that's more about acceptance of just not seeing things as right or wrong, or, any way that they should. The word should being the operative word, should be, but just saying it is. And the more you accept that for, yep, well, therefore it's meant to be, and I just go with that, it takes a pressure off you and allows you to be more true to yourself and in stride, and you will deal with that. You're totally fine with dealing with that.
Yep.
Thank you. That's a great example to share. Thank you. Is there anyone who was actually looking for, often before these calls, I get the feedback afterwards where someone says, I knew you're going to be asking this. So I've been thinking about what number I'm going to share. And I've been thinking about the story, that I would share. And if I've skipped over this part, like when we do a workshop, if I skip over this, I've had people say I was really disappointed because I was looking forward to, being sort of held accountable to my number and sharing what it was and so on. So I just want to ask, is there anyone that has been thinking about their score and does want to share it? Yeah, Leonie.
I can give you an example from last week where despite putting in a lot of preparation into being ready for delivering a workshop, something went wrong. And I just am totally devastated when I can't deliver on what I need to, avoid improvise, and I, feel the responsibility. And so I tend to want to beat myself up about that and think, well, I should have done this and I should have done that, and I will carry it. And so it was a very conscious decision for me to manage that and to go, okay, so this is why I'm, feeling like this, and this is how, and I need to work out how to handle that situation so I don't let it carry through to that number, so it doesn't put me down. It's something that I acknowledge, and but it was a very conscious process to have to manage that, because otherwise I would just naturally it would put my number down. And the other compounding factor with that is that I was in a location, not in my home, not in my home state. I was with people for a whole lot of reasons. It was a difficult environment. So Onion Skimple talks about other things affecting too. So there was a whole lot of external things as well as my internal drives being triggered.
So now that you're on the other side of it and you've got the benefit of being able to look back, can you see that it actually didn't go wrong, that it actually went right?
Well, interestingly, that was the thought that came to my mind, which probably never would have previously, but there was a thought that came in that, look, this was actually meant to be, this was and I find myself doing that more and more, where growing up I probably would never have done done that.
Perfect, because it really is. I mean, it only was wrong because it wasn't what you were expecting, you know, but life dishes up exactly what's meant to be. And if we have instead can see, you know, that phrase of you know, life comes sort of wrapped up, and if you can't see the gift of it, it's only because you haven't finished unwrapping, not because the gift isn't there. And I just think that's a wonderful principle to live by. And you know, sometimes you have to wait till you get to the other side and you reflect on it, you see what plays out, like the video instead of the photo, and then you can sort of go, oh, now I see it. I wish I could have seen that back when it happened, would have taken all the stress away. But with more belief and faith and just thinking of these sorts of things, you can get closer and closer to the same moment, you know, and get to the point where it happens in time.
Yeah, and in one funny way, using my risk aversion and risk management sort of approach from avoid improvise, in a positive way, I went, okay, so this has happened, understand my reaction to it, but now let me analyze, you know, what's the risk of this really? You know, has this really decimated the relationship, or can I come back from this relationship? You know, what have I really done? And so I sort of took the positive bit about that to then sort of manage and deal with it. And of course, I did disappoint someone, but it's not the end of the relationship. It's not the end of the world. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, and even that is, you know, may not be everything that you think it is either, you know, in terms of the disappointment might actually be a source of growth for them, or something else. You'll find out when the video keeps playing, you'll see that it all was meant to be, you know.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing. It's a great story, and I love your honesty, and which is obviously you. Isn't it curious how your IG just plays out to the letter? You know, whether it's the risk aversion or the verify one to double analyze it all, and still is analyzing it. You know, it's like it's always there percolating away. So funny. All right. Anyone else got something that they're dying to share about either their score or their journey behind their score, whether it's gone up or down? Judy. I got you, Alex.
Well, it's been 3 years since I became really, really, really sick. It was 3 years, April 11th, when I started working with a neuropathic, a neurological chiropractor. And he did a brain test and found that I was chronically stressed, which now to me is completely out of stride. I was probably maybe a 1 if I was lucky then.
Right.
But then just last week he did a retest, and I had the results this morning. And this is all about the brain. So he said the front of the brain is much, much, much improved. And he mentioned it on several different things. He said, now the back of the brain, there's still it's the unconscious, and it's, there's some mind chatter, or that was his words. And as he was saying that, I thought, no, it's not mind chatter. It's my complete drive. It's me. He said, it's like you're always thinking about what's next. What do I have to do next? And so I told him, you know, maybe one of these days we can talk about this, because maybe if I could get him to understand what I understand about myself now, it would help him also. But that's what I got from that. It's not mind chatter. It's me doing what I do, being in stride, in my opinion.
Isn't it so cool that instead of just having to be like a pawn going with whatever someone else says, you've got enough self-awareness to be able to, you know, calibrate it or bounce off of it, you know, and sort of go, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but really the voice inside me that I trust and I know is true to me more than anyone or anything else is saying X, and you've got a confidence to then, you know, understand it, own it, and go with it. That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well done. What a journey too in only 3 years. Just shows
Yes.
what's possible.
Yes.
And Alex, you're going to share something.
Yeah, I wanted to share something. So, so I just watched videos on the website about my avoid, verify, go for authenticate. Go for is the best word I can use. Avoid, complete, and I love improvising. So authenticating and improvising. And so I'm in sales, and I avoid making sales calls, right? And reaching out to new people, at least I have been. And I'm like, why do I do this? And after watching those videos, there were a couple things that struck me. And again, because I'm just getting started on this ID profile journey. And so Authenticate, it says, I made a thing. So this has like all this stuff. So I can see, oh, okay, yeah, I can remember. I like making images and everything. So I want people to do what they say they're going to do for Authenticate. And the business that I'm in, I'm essentially a sales manager. So for people who, if they can work and make money or they don't have to, whatever. And so when they say they're going to do something, they don't do it. I was like, why does it bother me so much? But now I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, why do I take everything so personally? And it really bothered me. Like, I shouldn't be that way. And so it gave me the freedom to be like, oh, it is okay that I feel that way. So my job is to go out and find people who are going to do what they say they're going to do and who are excited to be up to something. And I was sharing this with Judy, the one who just spoke, because she's the one who introduced me to this, which I'm so grateful for. And then improvising. And so when I was making my list, I like scrubbed my sales list and went through it, meaning I refreshed my list of people that either I've talked to about what I do and just need to follow up with and see if they're ready to sign up yet, or I've never talked to them. And so instead of trying to complete my whole sales conversation template, revising it over and over again, I've been doing this for years. It's like, I know what to say, but then I think, oh, I need to have everything complete from A to Z in case they say yes. Like as if I can't trust myself to know what to say. And then I thought, I was listening to Improvise and I was like, simply to move with ease and speed, like just get to it. And so I was like, oh, I can get to it. So I reached out to over 40 people in the course of 2 days and I scheduled over 15 appointments and it's been awesome. I'm like really enjoying being back in the game instead of only like, mining the current business that I have, which I do enjoy, customer service and all that, but I want to build it bigger. So that's what I wanted to share. It's really exciting.
Good on you. Now, I don't think you put your score in the chat, but before you share it, because I don't know what it is either, but I just want those on the call in what you just heard from Alex to think, okay, on what you observe, what score do you think Alex might be? Right. And then Alex, what number would you say you are today on that peak performance scale? What number would you give yourself?
Oh, for today, I would say, well, I'd like to say Thursday and Friday, I was a 10, but today, because of other things going on, my son being home and different, I would say I'd give myself like an 8, I guess. I'm new to scoring myself. So I would say, yeah, I feel really good.
So there you go. So would anyone be surprised if it was, 8 or like less than 8? You'd sort of be going, there's something not right here, right? Because there's an energy, you can see it. You're exuding energy. And when you said that you're I was expecting you to say at least a 9.
Yeah, okay.
That's because your energy comes across like a 9. And so I want for the benefit of the rest of the group to start seeing the difference of, even before people share a number, as you get more and more familiar, you can see it in people's faces and in their demeanor of how they're coming across. You can't fake being in stride. And even people who think they're being really effective because they're doing the job and all, but they're grinding through, they might be doing the job, but they're not thriving. Thriving has an energy about it that you're seeing in someone like Alex today. And, maybe you've been a little hard on yourself or a little humble type thing, but your energy is definitely at that sort of 9. Even if you'd have said a 10, I think we would have all believed you about that too.
Cool.
Yeah, well done. 10. Great sharing. Any questions from anyone or any other comments before we move on to the body of what we're going to cover today? Okay, so this is a really, I think, going to be a fun conversation. And like we've done with a number of our webinars, we don't need to finish it all today and sort of, hurry the discussion or abbreviate discussion that could be really valuable learning. What we're going to do is talk about the things that you really cherish and admire about each drive. So there's 8 directions, right? Up and down on each drive, use and avoid. And also how you really see that drive. How does it impact you? How do you perceive it? So that people get the good, bad, and the ugly of their drive. So this isn't personal in as much as, like, I'm a verifier. Everything we're going to say about verifiers is true for all verifiers. Some of us might have a little more under control than others, or like say with the strength, some of us might be actually tapping into them more than others. But this is at least what's naturally within you. And then you're either leveraging it and using it, or you might be mitigating it better than others if it's a vulnerability. But I think it's really cool to hear it in plain English from, you know, other people that have got either a similar or different drive. I don't really care where we start. You know, we could start in the order of the drives, like in terms of verify, then authenticate, complete, and improvise. What we want to do is do all 8 directions, and we'll capture them and put a matrix together by the time we finish that's got these components in all of the 8 categories. But I'd really commend you to listen and participate no matter what your direction is. Like we all fall somewhere on every drive. And if we're going to talk about, say, avoid verify, and you're a verifier, you still want to listen, because this is about learning about your shadow side. You know, the people that are really different to you can give you some really powerful feedback. And if you're a 5 in that drive, often you play a role of mediating between those directions. So this will give you more knowledge on how you could maybe do that even more effectively. So with that, maybe let's get underway. Does anyone have a drive they'd particularly like to start on? Okay, so let's start with the verified drive then, and we'll just work our way through. Let's talk about what people really admire and cherish about that verified drive. So this is probably good to hear from people who aren't verifiers. So when you step back and just think about what it is that you see in that drive, maybe people that you know who have it, what is it that you really admire and or cherish about that drive? Okay, shall we move on to avoid verify then? I'm just kidding.
I'm not a verifier, but I think what I admire is the ability for someone's attention to detail.
Hey, Glenn, can you maybe speak up a little bit, or your volume's a little soft?
Can
Just
you hear
get
me
closer
now?
to the mic.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm not a verifier, but I do admire verifiers' ability to go into the detail and analyze and fact check, which I'm not great at myself.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's good to hear from those who aren't verifiers, because it's like when you're looking at that drive, what is it that you see and cherish and admire about that drive?
So, Paul, for me, it's Gail. I'm similar to Glyn in that I admire the ability to go into all the fine detail, but by the same token, it's the thing that drives me nuts. So I'm admiring it, and yet at the same time, and I do live with a verifier. I'm a 4229, and my husband is a 7762. So at the same time as admiring it and thinking, oh, gee, I wish I could think of all of those things, I go, but hang on, stop. We don't need to keep going. We've gone through all the bits. So it's kind of almost a schizophrenia about admiring it and yet finding it sometimes very, or nearly always, over the top.
Yep. Yeah, I'm sure you would. Thanks, Gail. Who else? Well, I'll share a couple of things that I know other people share. So this is for the benefit of the verifiers to know, of all the things you do, what is it that other people really do see and admire, you know, that you might even take for granted. One of the most simplest things is just the questions you come up with. The fact that you even, like, they'll be sitting there thinking, but how did you know to ask that question? Where did that question come from? And you're like, I didn't, nowhere. It just comes into my brain. Like it's natural, it's instinctive. So verifiers don't have to process to come up with a question. Almost like a question begets a question, the answer begets another question, never a shortage of questions. To Gail's point, it's important to know when to stop, because you know, a few questions are okay, but there comes a point where it's enough already. But the fact that the questions just come naturally, there's a lot of avoid verifiers that just don't have the questions. and they sit there thinking, I wish I could ask a question. Like I would like to sound more inquisitive. I would like to sound more curious, more analytical, more substantive by asking a question and fathoming that a little more, but I don't even know what to ask. So, you know, I think verifiers can just overlook that piece because they either feel put down about it or they feel self-conscious about asking so many questions. I've had even teachers say about that, you know, kids in the classroom, oh, that person's really needy because they're always asking lots of questions. So we're well aware of the downside of asking the questions. Obviously, if you're a detective or someone in a scientific field, it's good to ask questions. But in relationships and so on, there's times when it can be painful. But I want you to know there are many avoid verifiers that even in a relationship or even in a creative area, they'll go, well, I just don't even think to ask those questions. And I love that they come naturally for you. Simple thing, but you know, it's so natural to a verifier, it's easy to take it for granted. And the other one that's really simple is prioritization. So what happens for a verifier is no matter what you've got on your plate, your mind instinctively ranks it. It's a natural vertical ranking of what's on. So you see a priority. It doesn't mean that two verifiers will prioritize things exactly the same, but you will at least prioritize. So you could have a husband and a wife who both put a list together of what they've got to do to get ready for a dinner party. It doesn't mean that number one is going to be the same thing, but they'll both have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, there'll be a ranking. That natural sense of ranking is something that's so helpful to the avoid verifiers, because avoid verifiers often say, I've got all this stuff that's on my plate too, or that I've got to get ready, but I don't know where to start. I don't automatically see what's more important to get, you know, to do first. And that contribution that comes from the verifier is hugely helpful to them, because without it, where it leaves the avoid verifier is in a place of overwhelm. And there are many verifiers that feel like overwhelmed. It's not that complicated. Gee, all you got to do is rank them and number what gets, but that's because that comes instinctively to you. And it's a real gift that is very often admired. It's so simple, but there are avoid verifiers that look at you and think, I don't know how you do that. I just get stuck. I don't know whether there's anyone on the call as an avoid verifier that could maybe speak to those 2 points you just made, either the asking questions and the prioritization, and share what it's like for you as someone who's, you know, an avoid verifier. Do you see what I'm saying is right? Do you see it from a different angle? Maybe just speak to that for a second.
Yeah, I'm happy
Well,
to.
it's Joe. Oh.
Okay, Joe, I got you, Glenn.
I was just going to say I completely agree with you. I'm at a part of a business networking group, and we often have guest speakers that come and talk to us. And we've got a very high use verify person in our group, and I'm always in awe of her questions that she asks. And I sit there exactly the same and think, why the hell can't I? Because I'm 2728, and I'm just like, my God, how does she even think of them? And so, yeah, I absolutely experience that all the time. And the other thing that I do really appreciate the use verifiers for is research and getting data and making sure that when they do come up with information and share it with me, that I can usually rely on the fact that it's pretty much on the money. And so that gives me confidence in working with them.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. Glenn, you're going to share something?
Yeah, I find it really, really hard to prioritize. So I've been running my own business for the last 3 years, and I had a career in finance prior where it was really structured and we had monthly cycles and knew exactly what needed to be done when. And leaving my corporate career to start my own 3 years ago, just when you talk about overwhelm, that's exactly the place that I went into, sort of a high level of anxiety and overwhelm, because I had no idea what to do, in what order, where to get started. And I think it's still one of the hardest areas that I struggle with is when people go, oh, just plan your week, just plan out your days and, you know, chunk it down. I'm like, you make that sound so easy. Like, why can't I do that? I have no idea how to do that effectively. And yeah, I'm constantly distracted by things and I've got no way of going, well, what should I really do now and why? So yeah, I struggle with that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Dilip.
can I add also.
One sec, Gail. Dilip was going to share.
Oh, sorry. No drama.
Yeah. So on the questions part, so it's kind of for me, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like as an avoid verify. Although I kind of appreciate the questions they ask, but when that verifier is asking questions of me when I'm trying to make a point, it annoys the hell out of me, right? My reaction is, why wouldn't you just like trust me, right? Take my word for it, right? Why are you? But at the same time, when they are asking questions in a different setting, not directly to me, that is where I admire them when they're asking questions, yes, but not when they're asking the questions of me.
Great point. What a great distinction. Because it is the flip side in terms of how do people see you. It is this thing around trust. There's a big piece around when they're making it actually is a drive that can erode trust. And yet, ironically, the verifiers will say, well, I need trust, I need to trust people. But it's just bizarre to me that the very thing, and I'm an 8 and verify myself, the very thing we say we want is the thing that we are inadvertently eroding by nature of who we are. Isn't that crazy? Gail, I think you were going to share something earlier too.
Yes, I was going to say, I so identify with what Glyn said. Every day I have a list of things to do, because if I don't, I'll forget what needs to be done. And the organizer I use has little numbers so you can prioritize them. I can't even do that when I'm given a list of numbers. I can't even go, I've got to do that one first. Obviously, there are things that are urgent, so they do hit the top. But there are other things, and honestly, I just look at it and go, yeah, I might do that one because I'll get fun out of it. Talking to Paul, for example, that's fun. So, but as to actually prioritizing them because of their urgency, importance, whatever the word is, no way. They just get done. And as I say, putting them into order, just I can't do, but I can do them all and they all get done. So it's an interesting difference. And as to lists, well, they are there simply so my memory isn't the infallible thing. But it's so interesting. Someone will come in and say, oh, have you done this yet? And I go, oh, yeah, I'll be doing that later. Because to me, it wasn't important, but to them it was. So it's just interesting. But as I say, it's still all get.
I think it raises a really good question that there's a lot of avoid verifiers that feel like they need to learn how to prioritize, that it's almost like an Achilles heel, that just like there might be others say, I need to learn how to delegate or need to learn how to, to sell or whatever it might be, be more decisive type thing. There are many avoid verifiers that will say, I need to learn to prioritize, but is that really futile? When you think about the way you're wired, is it really something else will drive you to get things done eventually from your other drives, right? But prioritizing, I wonder whether even if you did prioritize, like let's say someone gave you a list and said, well, here it is here, I've ranked them for you. Does that make a difference? Or does it just give you a different approach to getting stuff done that, like Gail's point, whether you started on number 1 or number 7, as long as they get done by whenever they need to get done, does it really change the energy and the fulfillment and the effectiveness for an avoid verifier to be working from a place of priority?
Paul, I have a question about this. There's a theory that if an individual devotes, the theory is 10,000 hours to a project, that they will be an expert.
Yep.
Because I'm an avoid verifier who is excellent at asking questions and prioritizing, because that's just my passion. And of course, the prioritizing comes from the complete drive also, making my list and all that. So I can see that now as I'm speaking about it. And yet the questions that's what my book is about, that I'm writing, about the importance of asking questions.
Okay.
Do you have some comments about that?
Yes. I mean, they're great distinctions. It's a bit like Jill said before, if someone's asking a question, it's okay if it's about the thing. If it's about me, it lands completely differently. You know, it's got a sting in it. And when you're asking questions as an avoid verifier, the difference is that you're asking from a place of curiosity. And they're what I call expansionary questions. So they're questions that have no predetermined answer, and they're really there to let the person discover and amplify and expand their own thoughts. So they're truly, like if you said to someone, how was your weekend? What did you do on the weekend? You don't have a predetermined answer to their question. But when a verifier asks a question, it's coming from a place, typically, I'm not saying every question, but so often it's coming from a place of expectation, of skepticism, of suspicion. Like, I'm asking this because something doesn't feel right. I think something's wrong here. I've already predetermined something's wrong. I'm just checking now that it is wrong. You know, or you've given me an answer and it doesn't feel right, so I'm checking and digging deeper. So your questions aren't a question underneath the question underneath the question. They're like drilling down like root canal. They're more going across and discovery, you know, creating discovery and learning opportunities. So often from a coaching point of view, an avoid verify person will say, hey, I don't have any of the answers. I just ask the questions that help you discover the answers that are within you, you know, and that's the nature and the talent, if you like, of the avoid verify. So they can be asking questions, and it's a great clarification from you, Judy, but it's a different type of question, and they don't have the sting in them that often the questions of a verify do. Like, even if a verify said to somebody, what did you do today? Just the wording and the tonality can sound like there's coming from a place of, well, you didn't do anything much today, and I'm just checking whether you did do anything. Like there are many partners at home that say, I don't like when they're in a bad place in their relationship. They say, I dread my partner coming home because he or she asked me what I've been doing today, but it feels like it's coming from a place of you didn't do much. It's already prejudged and they're just checking, you know, and are surprised if they did. Whereas an avoid verify could ask that, so could a verify, by the way, but they might have to think about it. Say, what did you do today? Like, how did it go? You know, and it's got a way of landing that's got no judgment about it. That's the.
Thank you.
All right. So Jose, you're going to share something? No?
I just love the fact that you wrote a book about asking questions, whereas those of us with that innate instinct would never think to do that, because we just do that. Who needs a book?
That's a great point. Yeah. Yeah, Kathleen, you're just on mute. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So I'm a verifier, but some days I want to be an avoid verifier because I have a task that I know is going to draw me deep in the weeds before I can come out the other side with a summary. Just because it's going to take research. So it's not like I always relish the process.
Yeah. Well, there's a comment. So you're a good example, or your question's a good example of we're our whole ID. We're not just a verifier, right? And when you put your whole ID together, someone with your ID thrives the more complex, the more challenging, the more of a struggle, the more you got to fight for it. You don't like easy wins. And so part of that going into the detail and almost not enjoying as stupid as this sort of sounds, the not enjoying of the process is almost key to the victory that you're going to feel on the other side, when you sort of go, oh yes, this thing was so hard. But unless you're sort of bitching and moaning about it and feeling like you're in the drudgery of it, it won't then land at the other end as the feeling of fulfillment. And I've had many people say to me, you know, they're moaning and groaning about something, and then they stop halfway and go, I actually love it. I really wouldn't want it any other way, but it's got to feel painful and horrible to then have that sense of challenge about it that they need to feel when they conquer it, you know? So I know what you're saying, because if you break it down just as the verify part, you'd feel like, yeah, I don't want to get into all that detail. I'd rather stay a bit lighter. But when you look at it through the whole ID that thrives on that struggle and complexity, then it still pulls you in anyway.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the avoid verify drive. And what is it for all of us verifiers? What is it that when we look at the avoid verifiers, we really admire and cherish about the way they roll?
Paul, it's Peter.
Hey, Pete.
If I can say that I have a good friend who is a coach of my son's football team, and I've been the team manager for a number of years. So we've been, in a way, doing this together, and our two boys are in there. I don't know his ID. I sent that up front, but you get an idea how people operate and what they naturally do. And I said to him a couple of years ago, he's in sales, he's marketing manager for the international markets for the Australian grain and so on. So he goes to Middle East and Asia and so on. And I say it's very interesting, you know, when he says something we need to do about the team, I generally go, yeah, that sounds right. And I don't ask a lot of questions because I get that sense from him that he knows what to do with the team. He knows what to do, and he doesn't really want to justify it. So, yeah, and I said to him a couple of years ago, I said, it's interesting, you know, in here, but also in your work in the corporate environment, you make your decisions pretty much on what you think is the thing to do and on gut feel, and then you spend time justifying it with data and explaining it and all the rest of it, but it doesn't make any difference to your decision. And he said, yeah, that's exactly how it works. And that, I think, is brilliant. You can actually come to that conclusion without having to go through this whole mud wrestle you just described, a verify, or even worse, a verify, avoid, improvise would go through.
Yeah.
That is really something. Yeah, look, this is the thing to do. It's, you know, even me 7643 would say this is logical without having to have any discussion or questions about it. I find that great. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Peter. Who else? What's another angle that someone sees in the avoid verifiers they really admire?
Hi, Paul.
Hey, Amanda.
For me is the acceptance and moving on bit. So how when something goes wrong or there's a problem and they just go, all right, it is what it is and it sucks or whatever, but let's move on. And, you know, even or from a fight or whatever, a discussion, and 2 hours later, an hour later, they're like, what was the problem? Let's keep living life. Whereas for us, I'm like, I have to be going over and over again and reanalyzing and thinking how it could have been better or whatever. So the moving on is just, it's brilliant. Yeah, I love that.
Lucky you married him.
Yeah.
Who else? I'll share something for me. You know, when I work with almost any avoid verifier, there's no judgment. You know, they get when you share something, they just hear it for what it is. They're not trying to problem solve it. They're not judging it. There's no sense of you're right or wrong. It just is, and there's a real acceptance. So it's not just accepting like a situation as it is, but when the person, and I think people often mishear us when we say one of their strengths is acceptance, because it almost sounds like they just accept things for what they are, like they don't try to change them and so on. But when it's you sharing your heart and concerns and fears and so on, and they just hear it and let it be, you know, often you don't need someone else to problem solve it. You just need to vent or share it, and the fact that they don't react can often be very consoling. I find it so valuable, you know, to not have that sense of judgment. On the other hand, I know that there are a lot of verifiers that people say they're really good listeners, because when a verifier truly has their heart in the right place and is listening to want to understand you, then that intensity of listening makes someone else feel really cared about. But I do love the way the avoid verifiers do it without any judgment, no matter what it is you're sharing. It can even be the biggest mistake of your life. And yet there's just, okay. So thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's good to know that. And no trying to change it, judge it. It's a beautiful way to interact with somebody. And the other piece I would add is, I've got you, Jose. The other piece I would add is the empathy. I watch how people who avoid verifiers actually feel the emotion of what's going on. Whereas I learned last year when we were doing these webinars, verifiers have like intellectual empathy, but avoid verifiers have emotional empathy. And at the end of the day, I guess it is emotional, but they truly feel it. And I think that's really cool. I watch people with that drive even talk about animals and how the animal felt lonely or disconnected, but they just can resonate with the energy that they're feeling from that, person or even an animal. So I think it, for me, as an 8 and verifier who loves the whole principle of empathy, and I can intellectually relate, but truly feeling the feeling is something doesn't come so easily, and I just really admire that in the avoid verifiers.
I was just going to say that I was having a chat. I needed to vent, I needed a process, and I have to externalize for me to get it. And everyone in my team has been warned. Jose will do that. He'll take you to one side. He'll have a chat with you. All you have to do is be in the room. He'll work it out. He'll thank you at the end. They've all been given this spiel about how to work with me, which is cool. So I've taken this person to one side and I said, look, this is what I need to process. I'm chatting away. And I kind of knew before we went into the room to have the chat that she was probably an up verifier like myself. But what confirmed it for me was that as I said, this is what's going on, she gave me judgment on that. She said, well, I think you're doing a good job with that. And I've gone, well, thank you. That's that's nice. Now I know if she'd been a verify down, I would have gotten some, I am listening, I feel, but it wouldn't have been you're doing well. It would have been more of a, how does that make you feel? Where are we going with it? That sort of, I can sympathize with your feeling rather than, and so I didn't pick it up then, but now that you've mentioned it, now I've gone, there you go. That's how that works.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point, because even a compliment is a judgment in a sense. I'm not saying they don't give compliments, but it means there's been an assessment, So even to an avoid verifier, when you give them a compliment or you tell them they've done something right, it's sort of got a funny feeling about it because they don't see the world as right and wrong. So it doesn't always land the way a verifier would like it to land.
Well, how would you need to say it so it lands for an avoid verify? What would land?
Let's ask them.
Yeah.
So Alex, if someone was giving you a compliment, how do they do it so that it doesn't feel like judgment?
Well, for me, this may not be the right answer you guys are looking for, but I'm learning how to just say thank you when people give me a compliment. So it's on me, it's on the avoid verifier just to say thank you when someone gives me a compliment. I'm not, if you want to say thank you, like do something for me, if you want to compliment me, like, do like public recognition. I think that's really important, like public praise, private criticism is something that can go a long way with people. So whether it's giving, that person a shout out on a group thing, even then it could be like, oh my gosh, like, no, don't think of me that way. Like, it's really not that big of a deal. I haven't done enough. There's always more to do. But maybe like, if you're Facebook friends with them or LinkedIn or whatever, give them a compliment on their page, leave them a Google review, that's taking action. And for me, that means a lot. That shows me that you're not just feeding me lip service. Because again, with a high authenticate, you could say that you appreciate me or that I'm doing a good job somewhere, but do you really appreciate it? So I don't know. So that's my feedback on that.
Thank you.
Gail here. I have slightly different feedback. I do say thank you, and then in my head's going, what's that got to do with anything? Why did they say that? What's behind it? Because I don't think that's relevant. And so it kind of, and it's that verify stuff, that barb to it, that causes me to have these thoughts which don't quite resonate. Does that make sense?
How can people give you encouragement and compliments in a way that then lands really positively for you?
When I know that they're empathetic, when I can feel that what they're saying doesn't have a message behind it. So it's when I can feel that what they're saying is genuine and from the heart. Whereas if it's got anything else, it doesn't sit.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, by the same token, I have the opposite issue. I know the answer, but I can't explain it. So, you know, someone asks me something and I go, oh, yeah, right. And I know that's right. And it is right. And they say, oh, why did you say that? And I'm struggling. And I've learned in my job, before I make a comment, I have a whole load of stuff from behind, just in case I'm talking to a verifier who needs that information. Fortunately, because I work in an information type area, I can usually come up with something. But it is a very clear vulnerability that I haven't got this capacity to come in behind. But if it's from the heart, yeah, it's cool.
I hear that a lot. It must be so frustrating. It'd be like someone who, you know, has got some problem with their speech and they know the answer inside them, but they can't express it. You know, it's must be really frustrating. And I would say one of the things that to share with you the flip side of what's one of the things that I find for me catches me out all the time with verifiers is when they get a fix on something, what I would call a fix on something, and no amount of discussion changes it. You know, so they'll say something like they're feeling really, you know, I don't know, frustrated about a particular situation. And you go, oh no, that's not what happened. What happened was, and you can, you know, give a different perspective on it. But then they go, yeah, no, I hear you. I totally get it. And I still feel frustrated. And I'm like, I don't know how to reconcile that. That's not something I've sort of cracked the code on yet. But I find that of the avoid, whereas with verifiers, when they get a new perspective, like new information, they go, oh, is that what happened? Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's a game changer. Then they shift, their emotions shift with the rationalization. And that doesn't happen so easily with the avoid verifiers. So I don't know whether you avoid verifiers can maybe give us a clue as to what helps you shift perspective, because for verifiers, that's really challenging.
The problem is once you know, you know. It's kind of like saying, that's not you. You're not who you say you are. And yet you know, and you know it's right. And when you've actually had the discussion and the verifier's gone through all the things that aren't right, it's you still go, but that's not right. I know it. I know this is what's meant to happen. And time will tell, in the sense that if you go, all right, you know, if I'm having a meeting with my staff and they all want to do something and I believe the opposite, but I let them all go, and guess what? They will come back and we do what I knew was right in the first place. We've just wasted 3 days getting there. So it kind of, it's kind of almost like a slight on you, because you know that you're right. And it's not very often that I'm right and I'm wrong. I'm nearly always right. You know what I mean? It's does the
knowing ever change? Or is knowing
if circumstances change, so if I'm in one situation and I think I should be going this way, and I'm in the other situation, I think I should be going the other way, it's situational. So I know what I should be doing in a situation. It's not, I know what I should be doing if I'm going in a specific direction. So if someone comes up with an issue and I know what the answer is, I know what the answer is. But a similar issue, which to a verifier could seem exactly the same, but to me is similar, and I come up with a different answer, then that they feel that I'm not being consistent. And it's that minor nuance in the issue that actually causes me to move in a different direction.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of weird.
Okay. Guys, I'm aware of the time. We've reached the top of the hour. Out of respect for everyone, we normally finish pretty much on time. But this discussion is just so insightful, even for me to hear it in your language, So we'll continue on, not next week necessarily, because we do a masterclass of a different topic. That's where you get to share whatever's on your minds, and we work it through whatever problems and discussions you want to have to learn more about your own idea or about IDs in your world and how to navigate that, more effectively. But the week after, we'll pick this up again and move on to the Authenticate Drive and, keep the learning going, because I think these discussions are really rich. So thank you for giving up your time today and coming along and making this really a valuable session for me and everyone else here. Have a great rest of week, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.